We're here chatting with Justin Smith, who is the co-director of athletic performance here at the University of Vermont. And Justin, kind enough to spend a couple minutes chatting with us on the topic of safety in training. And we've talked a lot in this course already about the way you put together programming and how to design workout sequences and exercise sequences that put athletes in a position to not get hurt in their training. So a couple of things we want to touch on, Justin, is first one is program, safety in programming, and then we'll move into kind of safety in the training environment. So anyway, thanks for spending time with us. Really,
no problem.
Appreciate it. So tell us a little bit in your programming how you think about your athletes' safety, how you try to put them in positions to be successful in their training, staying safe, but then also obviously being safe on the field as well when they're performing.
So in my experience, I think the best kind of strategy to take, I've been at the University of Vermont for 11 years, so we do some periodic testing of our athletes so we get a baseline of where they're at, and then from there that gives me a good sense of how I can progress them. So overall I kind of look at the big picture and see where I want to end up, and then make sure that I can teach the exercises properly, the athletes can perform them, and then they can progress them properly. So I always have regressions in mind if there's an exercise that an athlete can't complete because it's too challenging. I try to build in some progressions, but I think it's easier to start simple and kind of work on the fundamentals and then kind of build from there. So that inherently safety is kind of built in if you start with the fundamentals, being able to master a push-up, inverted row, body weight exercises first, and then progress them to more complex movements. Then you can kind of keep them safe that way.
You and I we spent some time collaborating on some programming for the incoming athletes here at the University of Vermont. And one of the things I found really interesting and unique about your style and your method was you really liked the idea of taking a squat derivative, which was the goblet squat, the dumbbell goblet squat, and really going high volume over the course of basically the entire progression that we had built for those incoming catamounts, and really getting them to try to master that simple version of the more complex squat. Can you just talk to us a little bit about your thought process behind that and why you went that direction?
Well, for us, the squat is going to be a foundation movement, something that every athlete, regardless of their sport, should be able to do. So we felt that it's very safe, it's easy to load, and it can be very challenging if you load it correctly and progress, and it gives you plenty of room to kind of progress, and it's again very safe exercise. The athlete can drop the dumbbell, and they're not going to put themselves at risk for kind of injuring themselves, and we've had good success with just loading that movement. And again, it's a fundamental kind of movement that every human being should be able to do, and when we're young, we're able to squat with perfect form, and we kind of lose that over time. So I think using that exercise as kind of a baseline to kind of judge where our athletes are has been a great tool for us. And it's something that you can do in season, out of season. You can do high reps as kind of a finisher. You can do it lower reps for a strength movement. There's a lot of, it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
So for us, it was, again, falls into being able to master the fundamentals, just like a push-up. It's amazing how many athletes can't do, basic body weight squat or a push-up. So if we can master those things and get them really good, then that keeps them safe, when we do more complex movements like bench press or front squat or back squat with the barbell.
Yeah. And then there's concepts about safety in sort of your training environment, which we'll get into in a second. But as you're thinking about safety in performance or in practice, strength and conditioning can be kind of that first step in proactive injury prevention, and it typically is really the first step. So for you training, you've got anywhere from hockey teams, you've got skiers, you've got field sports, you've got court sports. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different athletes in your department. How do you go about trying to focus on and training them so that they don't get injured in an inevitably sort of injury-prone environment like practice or competition?
Yeah, it's really tough. One thing we try to do is make sure we, progress the athletes properly and build a good solid base of training, whether it's through the use of dynamic warm-ups to kind of build some aerobic fitness and work capacity, to laying the foundation with more traditional running and conditioning. I really think just try to be multifaceted and cover all the bases. Look at the injury sides of the sport. Look at the speed and the nature of the sport. For hockey, it's a very physical sport. Guys are on a thin blade, flying around on the ice, crashing into each other. There's going to be certain sites that are going to be often injured, and guys are going to have issues. So knowing that on the front end, how to when I program, I try to make them as bulletproof as possible. Really focus on solidifying those areas, whether it's improving stability, increasing mobility, whatever it may be, to make sure that they're able to perform their sport at the high level that they need to be successful. It's a challenge. Not all of them are here to lift weights or do whatever. They're here to play their sport. So, some of it's pitching it in a way that it's more, the injury prevention is big. That's a good way to pitch it, because you can't make the club in the tub. So we need the kids healthy. We need them ready to go. So we try to look at the nature of the sport, injury sites, plan progressions that are safe, that the athletes can complete successfully. It's pretty easy to make a tough workout and put anybody through that and make them throw up. Like, anybody can do that, but to plan a workout and get somebody to improve when you need them to be, when you need them to be in shape, that's the challenge, and that's where the art comes in. And there's a lot going on. You got to get the athletes to buy into you and what you're selling, the coaches, because it could be the best workout ever written, but if they don't buy into it, they're not going to get it done. So, there's a lot that goes into creating a safe training environment. Having enough coaches to have eyes on everybody and making sure that they're doing it correctly. The athletes need to be engaged and bought in, and that's where kind of coaching is truly an art. And having good personality and being able to connect with your athletes and get them to do what you want and do it correctly. And
tell us a little bit more about the actual workouts themselves and safety in workouts. Because the reason I want to go into this a little bit deeper is we've got coaches coaching a lot of different sports in different environments. We have coaches who are on the water, on courts, on fields, on ice. I mean, it's across the gamut. But in an environment like a weight room facility, there's certain ways that we as strength coaches sort of across the industry try to keep our athletes healthy and safe. Can you just go through some of those and the kind of principles that you rely on in terms of how you set things up in the weight room, how you structure the supervision and kind of the timing and everything? If you don't mind diving into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, one thing that we've really been using, obviously, like, we start with the most challenging exercise first, the most neurologically challenging, whatever, we have an emphasis for the day, whether it's dynamic effort or max effort. Those movements are going to be first, and then as the workout kind of progresses, we're going to go into things that are a little more simple, so kind of working from complex to simple.
And why do you do that?
Multi-joint.
We've talked about this in the course, but from in your words, what's the rationale?
Just to kind of manage fatigue and attention spans. Like, as the workout progresses, kids are likely to get more fatigued and lose focus. So I think putting like a split squat or a push up later on in the workout, like, there's less technique with that. Where it's tough because sometimes you may need to put an Olympic movement later on because you want them to be powerful at the end of a,
but you better supervise the heck out of it, right?
So it's, there's some rules that you kind of need to abide by, and then sometimes you need to kind of be flexible. But, I try to, have an emphasis for the day, and that's going to be the first movement, and then a kind of a minor emphasis, and then some auxiliaries, and typically those are focused on strengthening weak areas and kind of the injury prevention piece where it's higher volume, things like that. So, and I try to get as many coaches as I can on the floor. Typically, for hockey with 20 athletes. There'll be myself and one other coach. And
So about 1 to 10.
yeah, somewhere in there. I mean, if we have the interns, we'll get them out on the floor, and I try to organize guys by strength into racks so that there's not a lot of changing of weights, and guys are able to kind of push each other, and it's competitive, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want a guy that can only bench 185 with a guy that can bench 265, because this guy at 185 is going to try to push too hard and maybe put himself in a situation where he's not going to be successful and become injured. So we try to set up our weight room so that we have, you know, lines of sight so we can kind of see everybody. If I was training the hockey team by myself, we have rows of 5 racks, so I can kind of be at one end and see everybody squatting and kind of walk back and forth and kind of check everybody out. We do a good job of teaching our guys how to spot. You know, use safety rails, use spotters, things like that are very important. Just you need to teach your athletes how to be safe. Show them how to spot,
Yeah.
what to do if they have to bail, things like that. You know, and then during certain times of the year, they're not going to be in situations where they're moving maximum weight. So, you know, safety may not be as big a concern, but we still want to make sure that they're doing the movements correctly. You know, you kind of, if guys are coming after practice, you want to make sure that they're hydrated. And so there's other factors that you kind of have to look at. You know, if guys, let's say it's 4 p.m. and guys are coming in for a lift and they haven't had anything to eat all day. So
Right.
you kind of get to know your guys so you can tell if there's any changes with attitude or, you know, things like that that may tip you off to, you know, low blood sugar or anything like that.
Yeah, the way I've described that has been really just paying attention and keeping your eyes open for kind of any of the extra stresses that might be coming into athletes' lives. You know, whether it is something like they're not properly hydrated or fed, they're not sleeping properly, they're some